What if the woman everyone thought was just a nurse turned out to be the only surgeon who could save him? And what if the truth she had buried for 3 years held the power to expose a family secret the hospital had hidden for decades? The trauma bay doors flew open and chaos spilled into the sterile white light. A military officer lay on the gurney, blood soaking through field dressings, his voice hoarse but unyielding. "Dr. Quinn," he whispered. "I need Dr. Eliza Quinn." But her badge said otherwise. Eliza Quinn, RN. Nurse. Not doctor. Not anymore. Chief of Surgery Victor Hale snapped orders with practiced arrogance, dismissing the plea as delirium. Yet the officer's eyes clung to hers, fierce with recognition. "You saved my life once," he gasped. "You're the only one who can save it again." Eliza felt her pulse thunder. She had sworn never to touch a scalpel again, but in that moment, with death pressing closer, her secret was no longer safe. Eliza Quinn had become an expert at being invisible. At 33 years old, she had traded the fast-burning path of a combat surgeon for the quieter life of a registered nurse at St. Catherine's Medical Center in Chicago. To her colleagues, she was competent, efficient, always reliable. She charted carefully, double-checked medications, and never made waves. To most, she was simply Nurse Quinn, another face in scrubs, blending into the background of a hospital that thrived on hierarchy and prestige. But invisibility had been a choice, a painful, deliberate choice. Her apartment on the north side of the city bore no trace of the decorated surgeon she once was. The walls were bare except for one framed photograph of her mother, Margaret Quinn, taken before illness had stolen her laughter. The furniture was modest second-hand. In the kitchen, an old kettle hissed every evening when she brewed tea she rarely drank. And hanging by her bed within reach, even in sleep, was a small silver locket, the only piece of jewelry she wore. Inside the locket was a photograph of her mother holding her as a child, the two of them smiling, framed in summer light. The locket's hinge was worn, the metal scratched from years of nervous handling, but Eliza touched it whenever guilt threatened to drown her. Her mother had given it to her the day Eliza graduated from medical school. "Never forget who you are," Margaret had whispered. Those words haunted her still. Her shift work was demanding, but it was nothing compared to the life she had left behind. For years, Eliza had been a Navy trauma surgeon stationed in some of the most dangerous combat zones in the Middle East. She had seen things most doctors in civilian hospitals could not imagine: bodies torn apart by IEDs, soldiers clinging to life in dust-filled tents, the constant thud of artillery close enough to rattle instruments in her hands. She had been brilliant at it too. Commendations, recommendations, whispers that she was the best combat surgeon of her generation. Until Kandahar, she never spoke about it. Not to colleagues, not to friends, not even to her reflection in the mirror. All they knew was that she had returned to the United States 3 years ago, stripped of her commission, stripped of her confidence, and desperate to start over. She had enrolled in a civilian nursing program, trading Dr. Quinn, MD, for Nurse Quinn, RN. No one asked why, and she never volunteered the truth. At St. Catherine's, she worked long hours, but kept her distance from ambition. She let others lead. She smiled politely in staff meetings. She stayed late to cover shifts no one wanted. And when she walked home past the glittering towers of downtown Chicago, she kept her head low, locket warm against her skin, whispering the same lie she told herself daily: "I am not a surgeon anymore." But beneath the quiet routine, Eliza carried a restlessness she could not silence. At night, when the hospital halls thinned and the machines hummed steadily, she sometimes caught herself reviewing vitals like a combat medic, hearing phantom echoes of battlefield triage. She hated that part of her, still responded, still came alive when the stakes were highest. It was a reminder of the part of herself she had buried, brilliant, commanding, but also scarred by choices she could never undo. Her colleagues respected her, but they didn't know her. How could they? They saw a nurse who blended in, not a surgeon who once performed miracles under fire. They didn't know that every time she adjusted an IV line or changed a dressing, she was fighting the urge to take over, to do more, to be the person she used to be. And so Eliza lived quietly, almost anonymously. Her neighbors knew her as the polite woman who watered plants on the fire escape. The barista at the corner coffee shop knew her as green tea latte, no sugar. Even the residents she trained in the hospital knew only her patients, never her past. Until the day Commander Jonathan Reeves arrived in Trauma Bay, too bleeding desperate, calling not for Nurse Quinn, but for Dr. Quinn. And with his plea, the fragile mask Eliza had built over 3 long years began to crack. If Eliza Quinn had built her life on invisibility, Victor Hale had built his on spectacle. At 55, the chief of trauma surgery at St. Catherine's Medical Center was not merely respected, he was feared, admired, envied. His name appeared in glossy magazines profiling Chicago's top doctors. His photographs hung in the hospital's executive corridor, all confident smiles and tailored suits. He dined in private rooms at Michelin-starred restaurants, hosted charity galas where crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and shook hands with governors and senators who treated him as one of their own. Victor Hale had been born into privilege. His grandfather had been a steel magnate, his father a philanthropist whose donations helped build the very wing Victor now ruled. To him, medicine was not just service, it was legacy. He believed St. Catherine's was his kingdom, and every white coat within it bowed to his authority. He thrived on contrast, the stark divide between those who merely worked in medicine and those like him who were destined to command it. His office reflected that divide. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to the Chicago River. His desk a slab of imported mahogany, polished to a perfect shine. Diplomas and awards filled the walls. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency plaques from surgical boards framed covers of journals bearing his name. Victor treated his surgical staff as extensions of his will. Residents scrambled to impress him. Attending physicians took care never to contradict him in rounds. Nurses whispered about his arrogance, but carried out his orders without hesitation. His clipped voice in the operating room was law, and anyone who wavered under its sharpness often found themselves transferred to another department. He carried himself with precision, never a hair out of place, never a word wasted unless it was designed to cut. Even his posture radiated command, shoulders squared, as if every room were a stage, and every set of eyes an audience he had already conquered. But beneath the surface, grandeur was insecurity he refused to name. For all his skill, for all his wealth, Victor Hale knew whispers followed him. That his talent for self-promotion sometimes outpaced his skill with a scalpel. That younger surgeons quietly muttered about corners cut or credit stolen. He silenced those whispers by sheer dominance. Better to rule by fear than allow anyone to glimpse weakness. When Eliza Quinn walked through his corridors, he barely noticed her. To Victor, she was background noise, another nurse, another pair of hands to carry out his vision. She blended so seamlessly into the wallpaper of his empire that he did not even recall her face most days. And that was exactly how she wanted it. But fate would not let her remain invisible. The day Commander Jonathan Reeves was wheeled into Trauma Bay 2. Victor strode in with the confidence of a man already imagining headlines. Chief Surgeon saves decorated Navy commander. Another feather for his cap, another story for his donors. He saw the patient's uniform, the military insignia, and smelled opportunity. What he did not expect was the way the dying man's eyes locked on Eliza instead of him. The way Reeves rasped her name with authority that silenced the room. Dr. Quinn. Victor had bristled, offended. "This is Nurse Quinn," he corrected sharply, as if the word nurse could erase the desperation in Reeves's voice. But the commander refused to look away from her. And for the first time in years, someone challenged Victor Hale's absolute dominance in his own kingdom. Not with credentials, not with titles, but with memory, trust, and truth. The wealthy, powerful surgeon could not understand why a decorated soldier would bypass him for a woman he barely noticed. He saw a threat where Reeves saw salvation. And in that collision, Victor's pride, Eliza's hidden past, and the commander's plea, the fragile balance of St. Catherine's would begin to crumble. The trauma bay reeked of antiseptic and urgency. Commander Jonathan Reeves lay pale and bleeding on the gurney, his breath shallow, his voice insistent despite the blood loss. "Dr. Quinn. I need Dr. Quinn." Victor Hale's jaw tightened. He gestured sharply to the team. "Prep for surgery. This patient is delirious." Nurse Quinn, stand aside. But Reeves's eyes never left Eliza. "You pulled shrapnel from my chest in Kandahar. You're the only one who knows how to save me." Whispers rippled through the room. Residents exchanged startled glances. A nurse nearly dropped a tray of instruments. Victor's voice cut through like a whip. "Enough, Nurse Quinn is not a surgeon. I am chief of trauma, and I will be performing this operation." Eliza's heart pounded. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. The past she had buried pressed against her ribs like the fragments threatening Reeves's heart. She forced her voice steady. "Dr. Hale's injuries are not standard. If those fragments shift," Victor snapped. "And what could you possibly know about fragments, nurse? Your role is to follow orders, not invent diagnoses." Reeves coughed, crimson blooming on the dressings. "She knows because she's seen this before. 18 times. Combat extractions. You put me flat, I'm dead. She positions me right, I live." Victor glared. "You are confused, Commander. Blood loss is clouding your memory." But Reeves's hand shot out surprisingly strong, gripping Victor's wrist. "Listen to me. She is the best combat surgeon the Navy ever produced. And you," his voice weakened but still carried authority, "you're in her way." The room went silent. Every eye turned toward Eliza. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the sterile floor, but Reeves's gaze held her fast. "Dr. Hale," she said carefully. "Commander Reeves is showing signs of internal bleeding near the pericardium. I recognize the fragmentation pattern. If we handle this like a routine trauma case, we'll kill him." Victor's nostrils flared. "And where did you supposedly learn this in nursing school?" Eliza's voice dropped to a whisper meant for him alone. "Kandahar, Fallujah, Basra. Places you've never been." His eyes narrowed. "Are you admitting you've been lying about your credentials?" Before she could answer, Reeves flatlined. The monitor shrieked. A resident cried out, "He's coding!" Without thinking, Eliza moved. Compressions now. 2 milligrams epinephrine, prepare for airway adjustment. Her hands worked with terrifying precision. Not the rote CPR of training, but the rapid practiced moves of someone who had done this dozens of times under mortar fire. Victor hesitated, then snapped to the team, "Do as she says." Seconds stretched into eternity. Then the monitor beeped back into rhythm. Weak but steady, Reeves's chest rose again. Eliza exhaled, sweat dampening her brow. Her mask had slipped. Everyone had seen it. Victor's voice was low, dangerous. "Nurse Quinn, what exactly are you—" Before she could form an answer, Reeves stirred his voice, barely audible. "She's Dr. Eliza Quinn. She saved 43 lives in combat zones. She saved mine once, and she just saved it again." The trauma bay froze. The words hung in the sterile air, heavy as lead. Victor's face drained of color. Around them, the staff exchanged stunned looks. A nurse whispered, "Doctor," another muttered, "all this time." Eliza felt her throat tighten. The secret she had buried for 3 years had been ripped into the light. Reeves's eyes locked on hers, pleading, "Don't hide. Not now. Not when lives depend on you." Victor's voice, when it came, was brittle with fury. "You lied to this hospital. You deceived every one of us. And if you think a battlefield past gives you the right to challenge me in my own trauma bay, you are gravely mistaken." The room was silent except for the monitors. Eliza's hand brushed the locket at her neck, the last gift from her mother. Victor's eyes followed, and something flickered across his face. Recognition or memory, she couldn't tell. His words landed like a gavel. "That locket doesn't belong to you. It belonged to Eleanor Whitfield, my mother." The room gasped, and Eliza's world tilted on its axis. The words cracked through the trauma bay like a thunderclap. That locket doesn't belong to you. It belonged to Eleanor Whitfield, my mother. Eliza's hand flew instinctively to the small silver oval at her throat. Her heart hammered so violently, she thought the monitors around her might pick up its rhythm. "No," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "This was my mother's. Margaret Quinn gave it to me when I finished medical school." Victor's eyes bored into hers, sharp and accusing. "Margaret Quinn was a nurse here, quiet, forgettable. But that locket, my mother's locket, disappeared from our home decades ago. You expect me to believe it just happened to find its way to you?" Around them, the staff shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided looking at either of them. Others leaned in, captivated by the drama unfolding before their eyes. Commander Reeves lay pale but stable, his breath shallow, his gaze flicking between Eliza and Victor as though watching a battlefield of another kind. Eliza clutched the locket tighter, memories cascading back, her mother's trembling hand fastening it around her neck, the whispered words, "Never forget who you are, no matter what they tell you." Her voice cracked. "This was my mother's. It's the only thing she ever gave me that I kept close." Victor's mouth curved into something between a sneer and a grimace. "Then your mother lied to you? That locket belonged to Eleanor Whitfield, my mother, your grandmother. Which makes you—" He stopped as if choking on the words. The silence pressed in, unbearable. Eliza felt the floor sway beneath her. "What are you saying?" Victor's voice rose, clipped and furious. "You are not just Nurse Quinn. You are not just some battlefield surgeon. You are the daughter of Margaret Quinn and the granddaughter of Eleanor Whitfield. Which makes you my blood, my family." The gasp that swept the trauma bay was louder than the alarms had been minutes before. A resident dropped a clipboard. One of the nurses covered her mouth with both hands. Eliza staggered back a step. "No, that's not possible. My mother, she never—" Her voice faltered. "Never told me, never spoke his name, never wanted me near this place." Victor's face twisted with something darker than arrogance. Resentment. Margaret was a scandal. A nurse who dared to love above her station. My father dismissed her, paid her to disappear. And disappear she did until she raised you in silence, never daring to admit who your bloodline tied you to. Eliza's vision blurred. The locket burned against her skin, a weight far heavier than silver. All the years of wondering why her mother avoided the hospital's gleaming towers, why she flinched at the Whitfield name engraved on donor plaques. All the nights Eliza asked about her father and was met with silence. She whispered almost to herself all this time. "I was part of the family I tried to escape." Victor's tone was merciless. "You are an imposter here. You've been living a lie. You deceived us all with your false identity, hiding your past, hiding your lineage, hiding the truth." Her throat tightened. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But even as the words left her lips, pieces began to click into place. Her mother's fear of returning to the hospital, the way she avoided photographs, the way she clutched the locket before bed. Margaret had known. She had carried the truth alone, protecting her daughter by burying the past. Reeves's weak voice broke through the tension. "Family secrets don't change the truth, Victor. She saved my life. She's a doctor, whether you want to admit it or not." Victor turned on him, eyes flashing. "This is not your fight, Commander. This is my family's disgrace laid bare in front of my staff." Eliza's knees nearly buckled. She felt exposed, raw, betrayed by her own bloodline. She wanted to scream at her mother for never telling her to weep for the years she'd spent believing she was alone, to claw the locket from her throat and fling it across the sterile floor. But she could do none of those things. The room had become a courtroom, the staff a silent jury, and Victor the prosecutor. Her voice trembled. "If what you say is true, then you are my uncle." Victor's lips curled. "Uncle, don't insult me with sentiment. Blood may tie us, but family is built on loyalty, not secrecy, and you, Eliza, are nothing but a living reminder of betrayal." The words sliced deeper than any scalpel. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. For the first time in years, she was not invisible. She was exposed, seen too clearly, too painfully. The monitors beeped steadily. The staff waited in silence. And Eliza Quinn, once the hidden nurse, once the combat surgeon, now stood at the center of a revelation that shattered everything she thought she knew about her past. The trauma bay had fallen into an uneasy stillness. Eliza's fingers trembled around the locket, its edges digging into her skin as if demanding she finally face the truth. Victor's words echoed my mother, your grandmother, and the world tilted. But before she could speak again, Arthur Reeves stirred on the gurney. His voice, raw and strained, cut through the silence. Victor, stop tearing her down. If you knew half of what she's done, what she's sacrificed, you wouldn't speak with such venom. Victor's jaw tightened. You're in no condition to lecture me, Commander. This is family business. Reeves forced a breath. Exactly. Family business. And for once in your life, Victor, you should hear the truth instead of choking on your pride. Eliza looked down at him, confusion etched across her face. What truth? Reeves's hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong despite the blood loss. His eyes, steady and unwavering, locked on hers. Because, Eliza, I know who your father was. I served with him. The words crashed over her like a tidal wave. Gasps rippled through the staff. Victor's face went ashen. My father, Eliza's voice faltered. You knew him. Reeves nodded weakly. Major Daniel Whitfield, Victor's older brother, the golden son who never came home from the Middle East. He was decorated, fearless, brilliant, and he loved a nurse named Margaret Quinn with everything he had. They met at a field hospital under fire. He wrote to me about her, about the child they dreamed of having. That child was you. The room spun. Eliza staggered back, gripping the edge of a tray for balance. Her father, a name, a soldier, not a shadow, not a rumor. A Whitfield. Victor's face contorted. No, that's impossible. Daniel died a hero. He would never have hidden a child. Reeves coughed, blood flecking his lips. He didn't hide her. He begged the family to accept her. But after his death, it was your father, Victor, who silenced the truth. Your father who paid Margaret to vanish. Your father who declared her child illegitimate, unworthy of the Whitfield name. A murmur rose among the staff. Heads shook, eyes narrowed in disgust. Victor's arrogance had been legend, but this revelation cast his entire family in a new, cruel light. Eliza's vision blurred with tears. All these years. My mother carried that shame alone. She raised me in the shadows, never telling me the truth. Because she was protecting me from you. Victor's face was pale, but his voice was sharp. Lies. Convenient lies from a dying soldier. Reeves lifted his head defiant even in weakness. Then explained the letter. He nodded toward his discarded uniform jacket on the nearby chair. With trembling hands, a nurse fetched it and drew out a folded, time-worn envelope tucked into the inner pocket. Reeves gestured for Eliza to take it. Her hands shook as she opened the brittle paper. Inside, the faded handwriting was unmistakable, strong, and deliberate. To my daughter Eliza, though I may never hold you, if you are reading this, know that I fought not for medals or for glory, but for you. Margaret was my light, and you are the reason I believed in tomorrow. If my family denies you, remember, you are a Whitfield by blood, but more importantly, you are loved beyond measure. Her tears fell freely now, blurring the words. He knew about me. He wanted me, Reeves whispered. He carried that letter into every battle. When he was killed, I promised I'd get it to you. But politics, family, power, they kept me silent. Until now. The room seemed to collapse inward on Victor. His shoulders sagged, his eyes darting desperate for denial but finding none. For the first time, the fortress of his composure cracked. Father never told me. His voice shook. He said Daniel left nothing behind. Eliza looked at him through tears. Because your father didn't want to share his empire. He erased us. He erased me. Victor's chest heaved. The staff stared at him, not with respect, but with revulsion. His power built on pride was crumbling before their eyes. Eliza clutched the letter to her chest, the locket pressing against it. 2 artifacts of love her mother had hidden, her father had written. Proof that she was not an accident, not a mistake, not invisible. She was the daughter of Daniel Whitfield. Her voice, though trembling, cut through the silence. All my life I believed I was ordinary, that I didn't belong. But today I found out I'm both more and less than I imagined. I am a Whitfield by blood. But I'll never be a Whitfield by your definition, Victor, because your definition is power and mine is love. Victor's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes glistened with something dangerously close to regret. Reeves, barely conscious, whispered the final dagger. Victor, Daniel died believing you'd protect his daughter. He begged me to trust you. And this is how you've honored him. Victor's face crumpled, the weight of betrayal and failure crushing him. His voice broke raw. I didn't know. I didn't know. Eliza's tears streamed unchecked, her chest rising with sobs. The staff, once silent, now turned their gazes on Victor not with fear, but pity. The man who had everything was suddenly the most broken of them all. And in that moment, surrounded by machines and monitors, by whispers and truths too heavy for marble walls, 3 lives collided. The niece who had lived in shadows. The uncle who had built an empire on pride. The fallen brother whose love had been buried with him. The climax had arrived not with victory, but with ruin. And from that ruin, something new might yet emerge. The trauma bay slowly emptied, leaving only the faint hum of machines and the heavy air of revelations too large to contain. Eliza sat in a chair beside Commander Reeves's bed, the letter still clutched in her hands, the locket pressing against her heart. For the first time, she felt the full weight of who she was, not just Eliza Quinn, the hidden nurse, not just the surgeon who had tried to bury her past, but the daughter of Daniel Whitfield, the granddaughter of a dynasty that had erased her. Across the room, Victor stood silent. Shoulders bowed, no longer the untouchable figure who commanded fear with a glance. His empire felt smaller now, hollow, fragile. He looked at her once as if searching for forgiveness, but found no words. Then he turned and left his footsteps echoing down the sterile hallway. Eliza looked down at Reeves, who slept peacefully now, his chest rising steady. He had carried her father's words for years, waiting for the moment she was strong enough to hear them. She brushed the edge of the letter with her thumb, her tears falling quietly onto the ink. Her life had split open in one night. The walls she built to protect herself had been torn down by blood, by truth, by secrets that refused to stay buried. And now, standing at the crossroads of who she was and who she could be, she faced a choice. Would she embrace the Whitfield name, claim the legacy that had been stolen from her, and force the family to acknowledge the daughter they cast aside? Or would she turn her back on that poisoned empire, choosing instead to build a new legacy, defined not by wealth and power, but by compassion, by truth, by love? Her fingers tightened around the locket. Her father's words echoed in her mind. You are loved beyond measure. Eliza lifted her eyes toward the door Victor had disappeared through. The question trembled on her lips, a question not just for herself, but for everyone who had witnessed this story. In the end, is family about blood or about love? And the answer, whatever it might be, was left for the listener to decide.